let's have this anchoring and this understanding of trauma and all that Western psychology and medicine has helped us to understand about it, and let us more deeply root ourselves into the deep and true spiritual nature of not only these medicines and these experiences, but of reality, that there's no need to keep these things separate anymore.
Hello, everybody. It's Christine. I'm your host for this podcast called The Rose Woman. The rose in this was about being full of yourself, like blossoming into your own fullness, blooming of self-blessing. It wasn't so much about the flower as it was a gentler form of woke, of standing in your own deep potency and dropping anything that wasn't about liberation and freedom. It's been a while since I've introduced myself, and there are a lot of new listeners. And I was thinking back to a time when I presented at the Visionary Summit in Northern California near Sacramento. And it was quite a diverse body of presenters from all over. And many of them introduced themselves with a pronoun first. So they might say, my name is Christine, I'm she, her. And they might introduce themselves in their lineage. I am the daughter of Monica and William. I am the granddaughter of Everett and Ilona. I am the granddaughter of Maria and Klaus. I am the mother of Jared and Sam and Kai and Connor, and the bonus mom to Laurel and at one time Grace, and often River and Dove. And I am the grandmother of Mason Ray. I might then say I am female by biology and identity, the 7,502nd generation of Homo sapiens sapiens in my line. I might introduce myself as some people did with the star date, like really taking it and putting us in the context of the night sky. This is star date 77,668, or April 17th, 2024 in the Common Era. It is springtime in the Northern Hemisphere, with a waxing gibbous moon and comet 12P approaching bright in the sky. I have a cabin called the Mouse House, where my books and family photos live and where people come to play music under 300-year-old trees. It's in the ancestral land of the Miwok in the Mount Tamalpais watershed, my home mountain, the western North American bioregion in the Nearctic realm, currently called the Northern California Coastal Forest. It's my home base, a little post-child rearing love nest of sorts. I'm currently unpartnered, but that's relatively recent. And I take a deep breath with myself as I hold that reality. My work in the world is to restore an ensouled view of things, that everything is alive, that we are nature and made of the planet, that plants and animals are our allies, and that all life is relationship, that we as individuals aren't our politics or our upbringing or the standards of society. We are rather a process in the mind of creation, a continuation of life's infinite ingenuity, and part of this grand dance breathed into being by the atmosphere and the earth herself. We are the peak of evolutionary intelligence up until now, containing all of our ancestors inside of us, from the stars to our mothers and fathers in our core code. That might sound a little abstract, but I do it pretty non-abstractly. At Sundari, a little eco-village and farm on Hawaii, I do it through teaching and through ceremony, through books, and this podcast. I've 7 books. The 8th and 9th one are both in various levels of completion. One coming up is The 9 Lives of Women, sensuality, sexuality, and reproductive stages from birth to 100. And one is Mantra, Tantra, and Ayahuasca, sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the search of the sacred. Sort of a tome on the path of transgression as a path to liberation. I also do this through 2 companies that I founded recently. Rosebud Woman, which is now 6 years old, offering beautiful plant-based holistic intimate care products and now lifestyle products for Reverent Lifestyle, and Radiant Farms, which is legal psychoactive gummies for health and wellness, kind of going beyond the mega fauna that we're all so familiar with, and saying there are thousands of plants that are here to help us be well in our body-mind. My greatest sadness in life is the long tail of violence. My mother's murder and the political violence I witnessed living in Iran during the revolution, as well as violence in the home. Those experiences put me deeply on the path of peace. I studied yoga and Tantra and meditation for many, many years. I volunteered for 7 years in the California prisons with life-eligible inmates to shift this separation and violence. And that continues to be a driver for me, unlearning the separations that cause violence and finding ways to dwell in love and gratitude and pleasure and humility more of the time. But as a path of joy, even though I did intensive study for 5 years in collective trauma healing with Thomas Hübl, and as I mentioned before, 22 years now of deep yogic work, and I'm working on a PhD on our first collective trauma, the separation from nature, what I found most recently is that the path to freedom is really the path of joy, and the path of almost every religion that I grew up being exposed to, where you have to ascend and leave the body to be with spirit or with divinity, is the opposite of the direct experience of letting the light drop in, living as the embodied light, and being completely full of yourself, so that you're completely alive and aware and experiencing and feeling the world as it's coming at you. Before I did all of this stuff, I started a bunch of tech companies, and if that kind of thing interests you, if you need to know the credibility of being a pioneer in cloud computing or working on these very major products for companies like Autodesk and Estee Lauder and Panasonic and all of that, or working with Singularity or being a Teal Fellow advisor, all of that stuff that lives in my resume. But that's not where I am now. I have gotten to the point where how we live in our own direct experience and what we radiate out in the world. Can we walk as a blessing field? Can we walk as a lighthouse? Those are the things that are interesting. And what gets in the way of that? So today I want to talk about something that can really get in the way of that, and that is fragmentation of attention and energy, unintegrated and undigested experience. And it's going to happen in a couple of parts. First, I'm going to talk about it more conceptually, and then I have a short episode interview with Alicia Sunflower Rose, who is a psychologist working on the question of aftercare and integration of big experiences in a more clinical setting. Like, can we allow ourselves to slow down, to process the things that have happened to us, really learn the lessons, and then let those teaching moments change our behavior in the world, leading to the whole mission of the show, which is this rising and blossoming into fullness. So here we go on fragmentation. When I was looking for quotes to express fragmentation, I came across something that seemed very unrelated. That was from an old article by Harvard theologian and tantrika Amelia Perkins. They really moved me, though. They made me feel this fierce clarity of being full of oneself and the potency, the potentiality of loving from this abundant place of being full of oneself. And she uses the word chastity. And she doesn't use it in the sense of like prudishness kind of chastity. She says it means whole-mindedness and is a cure for fragmentation. It is a progression of freedom toward love without grasping. That chastity is about the heart, and that when your heart is pure, everything is pure. She goes on to say, when you are no longer sloppily merged and confused with things and bodies, you begin really to love. You can really help or love or serve or enjoy the people because you don't need anything from them. You don't need to hold that thing that is beautiful. You progress through freedom to a new dimension where you start to make love again, but totally differently. Like, what would it be like to pull yourself inward? This is how I'm sort of interpreting it. What would it be like to pull yourself inward to yourself and then be so full of yourself that you see others, experience others just for them, and not out of a need or a graspiness or a getting or a protecting behavior, but completely out of the purity of that love. So I'm going to talk about fragmentation in that way, but keep those 2 points in mind, like being full of yourself, restraining yourself so that you're so full of yourself that when you finally do enter into relationship with another, it is coming from this place of deep witnessing and abundance that true love can be based on. All right, it's Sunday morning. I stretch out of my dream state and I orient to the day, scan my body from head to toe, and kind of let the world in one sense at a time. There's the rain on the roof, the morning birds, the breeze moving through the cabin, my own vague dampness from humidity and night sweat. And I go through all those rising rituals that, I know everybody has their own. Like, I get a little OCD. I splash my face 7 times with the coldest water because that got into my head at some point, and scrape my tongue in the Ayurvedic way and brush my teeth and put the kettle on to boil and set intentions and do my mantra and all of that stuff. And I have this thought on waking, which is like a little bit of a brightness, like today's going to be smooth sailing. I have a chapter to edit. I have an interview to conduct. I have some designs to finish on new altar cards for the Rosebud packaging. But then I pick up my device and the incoming messages begin to rearrange my plan for the day, whether that's like a crush or a colleague or a child or the government demanding compliance or the petty drama of daily gossip. I have notifications from the bank, of the lawyer. Everybody has a little piece of my piece that they want, and then the apps chime in. Log your food, do your exercise, mind the solar noon, and the news comes. Always with the news, right? A relentless stream of wars and crimes and celebrity antics and political outrages of the day. And, I generally turn those off. I've definitely got to turn off the alerts from the New York Times, I have to tell you. It's like, ugh, it's just one big nervous system spike after the other. And this I feel as a direct daily fragmentation, the dissipation of attention that kind of begins over and over. And while I'm pretty good at it now, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten so much done in my life already, or have so much direct ability of my conscious awareness, I still find that it takes practice to pull myself back to center, to be whole, and to stay focused on what truly matters. And I think a lot of the people that I speak with relate to this pulsation between being fragmented in our attention and in our embodiment, and we'll talk a little bit more about what forms that takes, and being integrated, being so in your center that you are peaceful and strong and you know what to do first. So fragmentation, in this philosophical sense, breaks our experiences, identities, and environments into disparate parts, which can bring a sense of alienation, of inner conflict, where we might feel split inside of ourselves instead of a cohesive whole. It can often include a sense of being lost or incomplete, or sort of perpetually out of sync with one's environment and inner self. And this can be accompanied by a dissipation of energy, where instead of channeling our energy toward a unified purpose, our energy leaks out in multiple directions, which creates fatigue and stress and reduced capacities for focusing the mind, what in yoga is called dharana, or concentration. It can also bring a loss of a sense of essence, where the core of who you are and what you were born to do, what's your core essence, is obscured or lost amidst the multitude of personas, roles, and obligations that you might have even willingly adopted or taken on, and sometimes, however, unconsciously taken on. So when life is this fragmented and we're not really in our center, we might also amplify that or compound that by acting inconsistently with our deepest beliefs or desires or values, and that feels pretty bad. A lot of the women that I talk with through the Rosebud channel and in my friendship circles also speak to a feeling of giving themselves away that is sort of socially prescribed, and overextension that can manifest as people-pleasing, overworking, or continuously shifting behaviors and attitudes to suit different groups of people or situations. And this can be, no personal boundaries, a reduced self-worth, that you give yourself so much in little parts and pieces to others that there is little left for your own core purpose, including self-care for many people. Coming back into center and wholeness might start simply with a pause to remind yourself or reconsider what you're currently aiming to achieve in the broader sense. I have a big piece of white construction paper, but really big, that I do at the beginning of the year. Here are the core things that are like really important to me now, professionally, personally, relationally, and identifying what is most aligned with my overarching aims on the daily. And I just look up at that piece of paper and I say, okay, does that help me achieve that, act like that, live as a blessing field, complete the book? It helps me clarify what I should focus on today. Just a little visual reminder. And, personally, I have always been a multitasker. I have learned recently, like anybody who's paying attention to neuroscience journals, that you can't really multitask well. That if you do one thing and you're doing another at the same time, it's continual partial attention syndrome, and they're both diminished. I have to tell you that so many things I do are en route, that I can do them seemingly in my sleep, so that I am somewhat multitasking. But that doesn't mean I'm conscious and aware with the thing that I'm doing automatically. And I want to bring that kind of consciousness and attention to what I do. So I have found that sticking to what really matters for a life, dharma, and purpose by asking what is the most important thing I can do today does help focus my energies and prioritize my actions. And if I ask that question consistently every morning, and maybe sometimes a few times during the day, helps me align my actions with my larger life vision and with the sort of divine spirit that came through at the time of my birth with what I'm here to do. Now, often the most important thing I can do isn't related to my core essence or productivity or my obligations or roles, but rather to self-care. Sometimes the most crucial task is I've got to rest, exercise, make an inspiring meal, or just recognize when my energy is being drained and turn instead to activities that replenish and restore, because living in a body is one of those non-negotiables, living well and radiantly in a body. Without that, everything else sort of goes sideways pretty quickly. I know how hard many of you work, and I see how many people in my inner circle, sometimes their deep gifts are left in the shadows of their daily panicked fragmentation. And I walk wishing all of us this very fluid, integrated, energized, and authentic experience, that we're all standing in this utter peace and power and clarity and doing what needs to be done today, that we're sort of walking in this world with a soft heart and an open mind. A soft heart and an open mind, that we're walking with a soft heart and an open mind. All right, well, that's all nice and good. I want to talk a little bit more about the kinds of fragmentation. I mentioned digital fragmentation earlier, sort of what happens when we're getting bombarded with things that are distracting our attention. But there's also sort of a fragmentation that comes when we are curating different versions of ourselves for different platforms and audiences. LinkedIn is this and Facebook is that, or whatever, AirChat is that, more vulnerable self at people who are closer in. But this segmentation can really be disconnected from who we are in real life. How do we present a sense of wholeness in the world? And that can extend into real life, of course, into a social fragmentation and make us feel scattered, like we're playing multiple parts without a coherent sense of self. And psychologically, you can have a fragmentation when you have conflicting emotions and thoughts that aren't in alignment. Like, what the right thing to do is, but you consistently do not that. You do something else because of some unresolved trauma or stress, or even dissociate from the part that you don't want to look at. Maybe the pressures of everyday life cause you to do things that aren't in alignment with your values. And then in that fragmented psyche, a lot of shame and struggle and not connection, in disconnection to your real life can arise. There's also a lot of fragmentation or splitting societally, where you have different belief systems in your family or in the culture. One person's telling you one thing and you have to abide by these rules, and then over here they completely disregard those rules, and in order to belong, you either have to hide or fragment or disconnect from groups that hold different sets of values and beliefs. And all of these forms of fragmentation are unsettling. They can create relationship strain. They can create anxiety and stress. And in general, the spiritual stuff that I talk about a lot, this separation from yourself, this alienation from the body, from the earth, from your neighbors, from each other, those are all part of this fragmentation. So restoring ourselves to a wholeness, knowing what we're about, creating a meditation that draws your light and your energy back to your own core, and then filling your own self with that light can really be helpful. And at the end of this podcast, I'm going to offer one meditation that you might try on pulling your own energy back to your core, being full of yourself, and then from that point, engaging with the world. So I hope you enjoy that. I might do it as a bonus episode. We'll see actually how long this goes, either at the end of this one or as a bonus episode. Look for it. So there's another kind of integration that isn't about just pulling back into center and stopping your fragmentation or distraction, but it's about digesting life, digesting the things that have happened to us before we were conscious or really aware, what one of my teachers calls the transgenerational, pre-verbal, and unconscious parts of our experiences that still live within our architecture and topiary our behaviors to a certain extent, things we adapted to. But that integration is a regular thing. If you have a breakup, taking the time to create a ritual around it and feel it and slow down and digest it and really make sense of it before jumping into something new. Don't bury it. Don't dissociate. If you get in a car accident, let the body absorb it, integrate it, heal. If you have a dramatic experience like a psychedelic or an enlightenment moment or a moment where your worldview is really just knocked upside the head, pausing, figuring out what those lessons are, writing them down, making up songs about them or drawing art about them, or figuring out how from that point forward you're going to carry those insights and experiences out into a pattern interrupt. So a lot of times, if you're participating in personal growth experiences, going to a weekend away or a workshop or a ceremony, which I of course love, those things have been very instrumental in my own growth over the last few decades. Oftentimes they will call integration like the closing circle, or maybe they'll do a Zoom call a few weeks later to sort of see how people are landing or how things have rolled out in their lives. But that would be called aftercare. Integration is a very personal process that can go on for a very long time. So I met a woman in Hawaii through my friend Tam Hunt, who was on the podcast, a professor of consciousness studies. Loved his show, by the way. If you're really a philosophy nerd, go back and listen to that. And she is particularly interested in psychedelic integration, but the principles of her work apply to a lot more. And she has become interested in this idea of a culture of integration. So that's how we start out this interview. We recorded while I was in India. The sound's a little more intense and not as good of a quality as I would generally like to offer you. But I think the content is really important for this topic. I start out by asking her, what is a culture of integration, or what does integration mean to you?
This topic of integrating, peak spiritual or psychedelic experiences, the culture of integration is really this recognition that we need to step into a higher level of self-awareness and accountability, understanding that things don't just happen and then just dissolve or finish. But if we are determined and focused on our own growth for our own betterment, but also being a part of bringing forth the cultures of healing, then the culture of integration is essential. And that's really rooted in our willingness to digest things over time, and not just mentally, but how we let that digestion process have different important experiences of our life become our actual embodied lived experience. Just like when we digest food, it literally becomes our physical body. How can we digest the different kinds of important and powerful lessons, learning, and growth experiences so that we become the embodiment of the wisdom of those lessons rather than just letting those pass us by?
I love that. It seems to me that sometimes we have an experience and it hits us very profoundly in the moment, but it like bounces against something in our being or in our embodiment, or against maybe some past trauma or something that's uncomfortable. And we let it trampoline out of our experience, and not much changes in the long run.
And I think, to bring it back to culture, we live in a larger cultural system and society here in the West, in the United States, where you and I are from, that doesn't value this level of self-reflection and self-awareness. I think that's changing, and I'm pretty sure you would agree with me on that. But for the long standing, we've been really asked to just kind of fall into line. When big things happen, there's even been this encouragement from our culture to really just kind of shut that down, push that down. I'm thinking about, different kinds of experiences of trauma, and we are asked to so much of the time to suppress that. And that's really the opposite of actively integrating it. And that the same thing happens in regards to, what we might see as peak experiences that are really powerful and transformative in positive ways. We're just like, oh yeah, wow, that happened. And there isn't this thoughtfulness, this culture of growing and breeding more self-awareness, and also sharing that between ourselves in our relationships personally and in community. So that's a part of a larger shift that's also happening, that we are seeing more people interested in that now, but we're also still in this process of bridging, because there are a lot of people in our society that are not on that page. It really is important that we are recognizing that it's not enough to just have some kind of profound experience, whether that be, profoundly horrific or profoundly magically beautiful, but to really allow ourselves to, again, digest and process this experience. It's a really important part of doing it, because otherwise, kind of, what's the point of these experiences happening?
Distraction.
Right. And there's certainly a lot of ways.
Entertainment.
I would just say to that point of distraction and entertainment, again, to go to kind of what has been the dominant mainstream cultural, perspective and positioning as we're talking about suppression. Yeah, we just want to look at different powerful, moments and experiences as a distraction. And so, where the origination of this concept of a culture of integration comes from the psychedelic world. There are many people that engage with psychedelics that are just doing so for a distraction and not actually to seek to grow in their deepening of self-awareness.
I think that you might even start with a desire for that, with the intention to grow or to have something profound, but then it just does get overwhelming. So let's talk about, what do you see in people who do it right, or let's say there's no right, there's no wrong, but people who do it in a way that it is integrated and it just shifts their life. What are the qualities and characteristics? And maybe this is a good time to talk about the difference between immediate aftercare and longer term integration.
Some very important qualities are openness. Not only openness to new experiences and new perspectives and new ideas, but openness to allowing your own consciousness to shift, to change. So not necessarily only ideas and perspectives coming from the outside, but are you open to your perspective shifting, to your perspective changing? That's something that I witness a lot happening in the psychedelic integration process, is that we have some kind of profound download transmission. These are often very multidimensional, meaning that they might involve multiple different levels of awareness, sensory experience, as well as different cognitions and feelings and memories, and potentially other kinds of magical experiences that people are having. And to be able to have this kind of experience and watch that process of integration over time means recognizing that there may be things that I need to shift in how I view and understand myself, my issues or my concerns, my gifts, my offerings that I have to share with the world, and life itself, who I am. And having an openness and a willingness to let go of ways of being, of ways of perceiving that we have tightly held onto is very important. And so as an example, to anchor that into what's the difference between aftercare and this ongoing long-term process of integration, which is days, weeks, months, years. I just happened to meet someone last night who's having a really profound moment of integration from a ceremony that she had a year ago. And I just happened to pop in as she was sharing about that with someone who had been there, that they hadn't known each other, and there was wisdom shared. And I was like, this is it. This is right here. This is this process. Things are going to magically come in their own perfect divine timing. And you need to be open to that process, that this is not separate from that psychedelic experience you had, but the ongoing work of it. So integration can show up in a myriad of ways over time, whereas aftercare is really about immediately after having the psychedelic journey. What can you do to support yourself somatically, psychologically, emotionally, energetically, relationally, neurologically, and really crafting particular space, time, attention, and practices so that beginning of your integration process can really have the most support possible. It's just like if you went and got surgery, which if you are looking at a lot of the indigenous ways of approaching ayahuasca, for example, there's like spiritual surgery that the different medicine men and women are doing. That if you were to go have a physical surgery, right, there would be very specific aftercare that you would need to do following that, right? Like you would need to be resting, you would need to be having fluids, eating healthfully, different things like that. And there might still be other additional things that you need to do to care for yourself in the healing, in the integration, whether that be some kind of physical therapy or you're making some kind of lifestyle change that's important for you. It's a good mirror and metaphor for the difference between that immediate aftercare and the ongoing process of integration. Now, if you were to go and have surgery, and you didn't take time to rest, you didn't take time to follow whatever regime was recommended by your doctors, by your surgeons, you might actually exacerbate the issue. You might cause a secondary infection or an ongoing issue in your body that gets amplified by you not caring for yourself. And that can show up then in your ongoing experience of integrating and healing following that surgery. And the same thing is true for a psychedelic experience or a spiritual awakening. If you're not caring for yourself very intentionally and mindfully in the immediate aftercare, that, whether we want to label it as good or bad, and it's not necessarily like that, it will show up in your integration journey. And there will be different levels, perhaps, of challenge that thusly are a part of what you need to integrate. That there's something in that you were, for whatever reason, unable, unwilling to offer yourself that proper support in aftercare. That has its own lesson in it as well. And it has its own real consequences. And it's all, I would say, a perfect part of your own growing and healing. And I've experienced that myself as well, where I did have a very deep psychedelic experience, and I had been given some very specific instruction on my aftercare and what I would need. And I did the opposite on one of those things, where I was meant to stay more in isolation and be with myself, not put any stress on myself. But I engaged in an old pattern of people pleasing and stepped into supporting someone else who wanted me to travel with them at that moment. And it was not well for me to do that. And that was absolutely a part of the lesson that I needed in the end as well. There were a lot of layers to that, but it also, one of the pieces was really exemplified for me how really vulnerable and precious that aftercare window is, and how important it is to honor what you need for yourself above trying to honor the needs of others generally, but also particularly in that vulnerable position.
Yeah, I love that story. I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to the people pleasing part in particular. You know what you need, but then you sort of self sacrifice in order to make sure that everyone else is okay. And then you didn't get the healing work you were out for. So I appreciate that pattern. But again, like you said, maybe that is the thing you needed to see out of that journey. I mean, how do you find in planning for aftercare and integration? Maybe there's a way that you, even going into an experience, know to allocate time and space, and maybe not to do that experience if you can't craft the time and the space afterward to integrate it.
It's the responsibility of whoever is facilitating that experience to really be clear with their participants around aftercare planning and expectations, and that process begins before you even say yes to the journey, and that there is, very simple but practical yet extremely helpful things that we can do, like making sure your home is already clean, that you have all the groceries that you will need, that you are stocked on supplies that will help you care for yourself, that you have some trusted friends or families or allies, loved ones that know that you're going into this journey, who might check on you, that can be holding an awareness of caring and supportive energy for you, to make sure that you don't have something scheduled in, I would say, at least the day or two following. And if you know that you are in a vulnerable place and you are opening up because you are in need of some deep healing, or you have some deep trauma that you're trying to work on, and that's why you're seeking out the psychedelic experience, then it might be even wise to give yourself more time and more spaciousness. And additionally, what kinds of additional supports might you pre-plan for, whether that's making sure you have a session with your therapist that you've been seeing, or with your trusted acupuncturist or body worker, someone who you know can help you continue to move that energy following this experience. But I think it's really unwise that there are a lot of facilitators who, kind of just take people on into these ceremony experiences last minute, or like, oh yeah, you're fine to go to work the next day, because you never know what these experiences will bring. And even if you have a euphoric peak experience and it's not like a very deep, like trauma healing, releasing kind of experience, there is still going to be an increased vulnerability within your energetic field, within your psyche. And it's just, if you're going to go in and you're going to have this deep experience, give yourself the gift of having the spaciousness to hold and care for that, because things are moving and settling and shifting on levels that you may not even be able to perceive of. And it's wise to trust in that process to unfold and to do your best to support it.
I think I run too fast. Do you find that commonly with your clients?
I think that, again, to take it back to the mainstream culture, it's so normative for us all to run too fast. We give in, back to that people pleasing energy. We give in to the expectations and the demands of others, of society. We have a lot of collective subconscious guilt around productivity and needing to be of value and having our worth, even again, subconsciously tied to how we are able to show up and do for others. And so I do find that there are people like, I can't take time off. I can't step away from work for this reason or that reason, or I can't say no to this thing for that reason. Ultimately, if you are opening yourself up to healing, then these are part of the lessons that you'll need to take on, really carving out the space that you need for you. Because as long as that is secondary, like in my example that I gave, it will have consequences. And indeed, that was a very important learning lesson for me that really anchored it in for me. There are certain times and places and ways that it will hurt me if I do not prioritize myself. And since that time, I have had a lot of deep integration around how profound it is to put myself first and to slow down. Yeah, so many of us just move so fast, and there's such deep healing and, again, integration on subconscious levels that happens when we rest, when we slow down. It's very important.
I think I had a woman on, a physician, Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith, and that's her whole point, is sacred rest. It's a good episode. Mm-hmm. I'd love to sort of backpedal a little bit and now hear your story. Like, how did you get into this work, and what brings you to this topic of integration?
The story of how I got into this work of really wanting to support the psychedelic renaissance by bringing in trauma-informed care into shamanic-based plant medicine ceremonies, as well as wanting to really promote and be a part of this culture of integration. And I do a lot of integration work with people one-on-one, and I've been a part of doing that in different kinds of ceremony experiences. All of this comes from my own personal healing journey, as well as my professional journey to be a healer, to be a space holder for healing, which themselves are very closely intertwined and had a very symbiotic relationship. So I entered grad school back in 2012. That process for me of becoming a mental health therapist really helped me to break out of my dissociation and to come out of deep compartmentalization and step into a sovereign honesty, a somatic, emotional, psychological honesty with myself around the very intense sexual abuse I experienced as a child, and psychological, emotional, and spiritual abuse that I experienced throughout my first 24 years of life. Having that come forward in my process of learning how to be a safe space holder for others as a therapist just completely catapulted and changed my life, as you might imagine. In that, my spiritual journey really opened up as well. Getting more in touch with my body, with my heart, opened up my connection with my soul and with my spirit on a whole other level, where I moved out of an intellectual place with it, and I moved into an embodied, deeply felt and known sense of spirit that continued to unfold for me over time. And as it did, I found a very deep and profound soul resonance with earth-based spirituality, what other people might also call shamanism, that really just helped me understand myself so deeply. And when I learned about that more, when I began to experience that and have different teachers and experiences and trainings, journeys with myself, it just was like, this is how I see and understand reality. And I've never had this framework before, but this is where it is. And as I continued on that journey with my own spirituality and connecting more and more with earth-based ritual and ceremony and shamanism, I knew the psychedelic path was going to call me, and waited, for it to come directly to me. And once it did, that really catapulted, again, my own personal healing journey, but also my spirituality and also my professional journey in a whole new level. And I've had some of the most profound healing experiences of my life in the psychedelic space. And it's through all of the different journeys that I've had personally, and also different ways I've been a professional support in psychedelic spaces, that I've come into direct contact with how important it is to have trauma-informed spaces, and how important it is to really be with the true spiritual essence of these different psychedelics, of these plant medicines, to support and honor the cultures and the cultural practitioners from where these medicines come, for who facilitates these medicines and has been holding the traditions for a long time. And really recognizing at the same time there needs to be a blending, a marriage, a balance, because the acuteness of how intensely psychedelics can work with trauma, there needs to be a proper space holding around that. And at the same time, If we look at the modern clinical psychedelic movement, it is devoid of spirit by and large. And that is also, I think, very dangerous because there are multitudes of different, very powerful, very real, true, profound spiritual energies that are happening with psychedelic experiences. So I also got to experience firsthand the very important need of integration. And I shared that one story. That's one of many stories of my own personal journey that highlighted for me how essential it is and how much more very explicit guidance and support is needed for a lot of Westerners around integration. And that if we are going to go have all these powerful experiences, by golly, we better integrate them. Yeah, so all of that all together, many different threads in there that has led me to this now where I'm stepping into actively being a voice to speak to all of this and to help lend my expertise and knowledge as a trauma therapist for over a decade, and also a shamanic facilitator and practitioner for the last 7 years, and a deep psychonaut myself, and one who knows how to navigate those realms for herself and support other people in doing it to really see the change that I want to see in this collective movement that is so profound to have the best of both worlds. Let's have this anchoring and this understanding of trauma and all that Western psychology and medicine has helped us to understand about it, and let us more deeply root ourselves into the deep and true spiritual nature of not only these medicines and these experiences, but of reality, that there's no need to keep these things separate anymore.
Oh, I love that so much. Dr. Kyle Ortego, he was last week's show and he's written an integration manual. Have you seen that? It's called Beyond the Narrow Life. In that conversation, he's also a psychologist. We talked about the lens of psychology in general as being highly individual and personal and based on material reality. And then, you have transpersonal psychology. I do a lot with ecological psychology, seeing yourself as part of nature. And the term came up during the conversation of cosmic psychology. Can you even begin by talking about yourself and your cosmology and your worldview and bring that into the healing of your trauma? I thought that was such a great expansion. It seems to be very in line with what you're talking about.
Yeah, I love that. I'm definitely all about that. And, that makes me think about just like the power of astrology and understanding ourselves from different lenses like that, whether that's astrology or human design or gene keys. But in particular, astrology is really working with these profound collective cosmic archetypes. We can see in our natal charts so much that points to the different experiences that we would have, that we did have, and that we will have, and the development of self. And it's at the same time very tapped into the collective, because not any one of us is, the owner of these archetypes, but rather there are these larger cosmological forces that are working in our lives collectively and individually. And it's that synthesis, that mirror between the micro and the macro. And I'm definitely all about that.
If you could wave a magic wand and have one thing happen for all of humanity, what would it be?
It would be self-love. And this is why. I think at the core of so much of our collective trauma, our individual, ancestral, historical trauma, is this deep underlying belief of unworthiness. And that's something that we can witness in many ways. And, in my own experience of my life and being able to be a therapist and a healer and a guide for, hundreds and hundreds of people over the last decade, I have also seen that this is a very, universal experience that definitely lives deep within our collective subconscious. And it is this falsely derived belief in unworthiness that ends up creating so much of our suffering. And again, it's subconscious, it's unconscious for so many people. We're taught so many ways to be well defended from it. And what happens when we approach those false beliefs of unworthiness is we start to change our entire reality. It's really hard to really understand and love and care for other people when we have an intense aversion to do that for ourselves. And when we can love and understand and honor ourselves on a deep spiritual level, what that is letting God, letting Source love us through us. When we do that, when we allow the divine to be that source of love from within, then we become these channels, these vessels for that consciousness. And we get to be that, embody that in the world and share that love with others. It's absolutely key to our individual and our collective liberation. So if I could wave that magic wand and bless everyone in the world with self-love, I would guarantee that we would see that cascade and ripple throughout our collective on all levels, a embodiment of unconditional love for all beings.
I'll take that one. Perfect. Well, that makes me feel so good. Get so heady sometimes, and then you bring it really right back to loving yourself. Thank you.
I think if anyone wants to really wonder what is the integration journey about, to take it beyond, again, psychedelics or spiritual awakening, if we were to look at this life journey as an ongoing ceremony and process of integration, what does that really mean on the deepest spiritual level? Well, we are integrating that we are spiritual beings having this human experience. And from my understanding, that I've also seen mirrored by many, many, many over human history and today as well, is that who we really and truly are is love. And how we come to embody that and know that and be that in relation to ourselves, in relation to others, in relation to God, in relation to Source, comes down to this ongoing process of integrating it. Because it's not enough to just intellectually know it. We must meet all of the parts of ourselves and that don't believe it, like these beliefs in unworthiness, and come into direct contact with them and be willing to be courageous enough to allow that true love that is at the center of who and what we all are and what this whole dream of existence in life is, to shine forth and to really just melt away the illusion of unworthiness, the illusion of separation. And life is the ceremony, and life is the ceremony of integration. And we're out here, all of us, throughout our lifetimes, coming into a remembrance of this truth of who we are. And it's all about love.
Thank you so much, Alicia. You are worthy of the pause to do your own integration and healing. It is the necessary step that we each digest and integrate our own experiences and come back into wholeness and be full of ourselves for the rest of the world to heal. There will be times when we're feeling very resourced and very capable and very able to give, and there are times when we're going to have to take some loving support from others or from the energetic field that surrounds us. And it's okay. It doesn't mean we're needy and receiving all the time. In fact, most of the time now, I find I'm in the position of holding the field for others who are in a process. But that's only because for many, many years, others held for me while I learned. So whatever you need, aftercare, ongoing integration, or restorative healing practices, I know that you will get it. I am offering you 2 free download meditations this week as a bonus episode to help with that. One is the Living Flame. It's a visualization of the spine. And another one is the Living Toroidal Field of Light, this beautiful energy meditation. So I hope you enjoy those as a gift. It was my birthday this week, so I'll make those a gift to you because it is my truest joy to share the things that I have learned and been given. So please support the podcast by supporting Rosebud Woman, rosewoman.com. Very finely crafted, organic and plant-based body products, sexual wellness products, candles, books, journals, and other things to make the home and the intimate space more reverent. And then our gummies at radiantfarms.us, which include a new product, Bobinsana or Serenita Bobinsana, the siren or the mermaid of the river, a beautiful dream-enhancing, relaxing, and uplifting plant from the Amazon made into a gummy form. All right. Much, much love now and always.